Part 2, Chapter 7, Left Behind. His sharp cackling danced around me like ricocheting bullets, keen on stripping the paint from my walls. Spectral, I turned in a half circle, bones splintered and fingernails frayed. I was encased in a stone box without a light, unable to see anything, but I could smell the wet rock. I recall the beginning. The walls were further than they were now, and had previously been decorated by moss and a steady drool of water. That was an eternity ago. One hand shot out like a piston, reaching for what I thought was a lurking shadow. My fingers jammed into the stone, and a low bubbling hiss coiled around my teeth. Panicked, unable to think clearly, I shivered and directed my gaze upward. Above me, close to 100 feet away, were these wispy, tendril-like shapes, fading in and out of reality, emitting a small light that reluctantly caressed the top of my head before, now my face. I squinted, discerning spider legs and seaweed alike, interchangeable, never consistent. His cackle lashed my ears, and the walls leaned away from me, back at the beginning. I tried to scream, but that push instead caused me to step forward. The black grew thicker as I moved blindly forward, unsure if I was running towards or away from his mocking voice. I tasted my name in the air, and a static jolt suddenly locked me in place. This claustrophobic place instantly inverted. Nothing changed visually, but I knew I was upside down, and the room itself was descending. Or ascending. The rumble around me densified the base of my skull, and Destro's hungry laughter infiltrated my skin. I collapsed to the floor, pinned by circumstance, lacking the mind to retaliate. The walls leaned in at me again, faster this time, pressing from all angles and forcing me to stand and thin myself out. Singing, laughing, taunting. His eyes were everywhere, and the horror I felt only strengthened his resolve. The walls were crushing me, and I couldn't mutter a noise. The last thing I remember was him saying her name. Tansu. Strangely, I awoke calm. My eyes remained shut, but in an instant I was lifted back into reality. The dream was nothing but a ghost behind my eyes. The springs beneath me squeaked as the weight of my body shifted to the center. Laying on my back, I pulled the blanket up to my chin and kicked one leg out and onto the floor. Breathing through my stuffy nose, I allowed myself to ease into the new day. I lifted my arm to rub my eye, but felt a stabbing pain in my back. My spine arched upward a slight amount, then settled. A skitter of remembrance pinged every minor injury I sustained last night. A swarm of rational and conflicting ideologies bounced around in my head, and I found myself unable to focus on a single point of inner monologue. I pressed one hand against my forehead and set my feet on the cold rug. Blurred, surreal, I collected myself slowly. I proceeded to roll my shoulder, making it crack 3 times. Every joint was tight from a restrictive night's sleep, though I don't think my couple of hours could count as such. Consumed by a loud yawn, I rubbed my entire face. All the skin I touched pinched like bee stings, but didn't last. I cupped both hands over my face and pressed against my skull, now rubbing more intensely, getting as many morning itches out of the way as I could. In the background, I could hear a loud stream of water coming from the bathroom. It was still early. I confirmed that it was before school by glancing at the kitchen and reading the microwave's digital clock. It was clear that it was Tansu in the shower, getting herself ready. She had been taking the bus lately. Kari's schedule had been inconsistent. I stood up from the couch and dragged my aching feet into the kitchen and looked at the calendar on the fridge. It's Thursday, a lukewarm morning. A moment of understanding struck me. Everything about who I am settled into my brain, and I was awake. Staring at the dates, I poked my index finger against today's square. There was a hum between my ribs. Destro's haunting face stifled my breathing, and I came to an abrupt decision. I'm going to school today, I said to myself in monotone. A warbling rose in my skull, tickling the inside of my nose. Finally, Alice groaned. School is the perfect place to test whose resolve is stronger. You and your desire to be a passive wolf, or my own will to gnaw on the bones of your peers. She grinned sinisterly. I shut my eyes, snarling as her face painted the back of my lids. I'm confident that I can keep it together. Now that I've had some time, that confidence will fade. You know, it usually takes only 4 to 10 kills for the host's soul to be eradicated. At least, gone to the point of losing autonomy. Alice, we've been over this. It's not gonna happen. Right. You want to live as much of a normal life as possible. You cannot abstain from this fight, because the fight will always find you. The sooner you leave this place and go on the prowl, the sooner you can abandon these fickle morals and become superior. The closer we can get to killing sin. I turned away from the calendar and folded my arms. Don't be such a bitch. Besides, that's why I'm going back to school. The fight will find me. Destro made a direct threat against Tansu. I don't have a clue what information he gathered from me, but I know she isn't going to be safe without me around. If I'm in a crowded place like that, I doubt any Tuffle would make a move. How about this? Let's leave this shithole town and hunt him down. Make sure he can't hurt your precious friend. Then we just keep going. To the next, and the next, and the next. I frowned. I'm not leaving them. At least, not yet. Trust me, I've given that thought. But I can't just disappear. This life, it's mine, and I'm not forfeiting it so easily. I blew some air up my face to move the hair from my eye. As long as I keep my emotions in check, you're my prisoner. Semi-confident, I sauntered over to the closet by the front door and pulled out my backpack, along with a duffel bag. Lazily dragging them to the couch, I began unpacking a few things to wear. As I dug and shifted through the clothes, I lamented the fact that I no longer had a dresser, just these bags. I don't really mind, considering all they've given me, but it would be nice to have some storage and my own bed again. When picking out something to wear, I glanced at my arm. All that was left of the deep wound was a long line of pinched skin, a very thin scar that covered almost the length of my forearm. I can explain this in any way I need to, but it's hardly noticeable. For now, I wanted to avoid that as much as possible, so I grabbed the typical long-sleeve shirt and a pair of cropped jeans. I changed my clothes very quickly in the living room and set my dirty pajamas aside to be washed later. Just as I got my shirt pulled over my head, I heard a door open. Tansu emerged from the steamy bathroom with a towel wrapped around her. She stood in the hallway, holding the towel up over her chest with one hand and using the other hand to dry her hair with a washcloth. She didn't notice me at first. I was just admiring her. She was so pretty, much more attractive than I found myself. She then turned to shut the door behind her and noticed I was awake and staring at her. She shuffled in my direction. You're up early. Are you nauseous again? I averted my eyes, awkwardly staring at my bag. I blushed. She's coming toward me in nothing but a towel, and I felt so awkward. No, I feel pretty all right, I chuckled, pushing my messy, dirty fringe to the side and over my ear. That's good. Well, it's nice to see you up earlier than 10, she giggled. Yeah, actually, I decided that I'm going to school today. She looked at me with a slight tilt of her head. Really? Do you think that's a good idea? She sounded concerned. I shrugged. I spent long enough wallowing. Thinking in circles all day is killing me. What better way to break this funk than droning teachers in large crowds? I said sarcastically. I guess. She lowered her eyes to the floor like she was pondering some faraway thought. If that's what you want, I support it. Let me go get dressed. The bus will be here in about 20 minutes. I'll see you when it's time to go. Okay, I'm going to make sure I have everything in my bag. She closed the bedroom door behind her, and I continued my backpack preparation. First thing that caught my attention was a blue-covered notebook, one that I recently lent to Joey. I thought about him and relished the thought of seeing him soon, but that little light inside was quickly strangled by guilt. I haven't spoken to him at all since the last time I saw him at school. I know he's going to be pissed at me, but I have to face him, especially with this demon business going on. I zipped up the bag and threw it over my shoulder. Tansu wasted no time getting dressed, and she exited her room in just a few minutes. I felt my heart stop as I took in the sight of her. She wore a 3/4 sleeve two-tone shirt, black sleeves and white torso, accompanied by a thigh-high blue denim skirt and a long black and white horizontal striped leggings. The outfit was completed by a few bracelets, 2 gemstone necklaces, a green hairpin holding a bunch of fringe, and Converse sneakers. She approached me and took her bag from the floor. All the while, I just stared at her. She finally noticed. "Kimmy, are you okay? You're zoning out again." She waved her hand in front of my face. I'm fine. I smiled big, shifting the conversation. "Wow, you look great today. I can see you took a few tips from those fashion mags. I mean, seriously, where'd you find those leggings? They're so cool." She turned beet red and rubbed her arm, rocking her body a little. "You like them? My mom helped me pick out a few things for the new school year when we arrived. Is this too much?" "No way. It's perfect. Seriously, I might have to fight off every boy in school, maybe even a few girls." I winked. This made her even redder than I thought possible. Inside, Alice was getting annoyed at my jeer, but kept her mouth shut. "I don't think that'll happen, Kim," she said with puffed, embarrassed cheeks. "Well, I guess we'll see, won't we?" "Mm-hmm, sure." She shook her head, amused. "The bus will be here soon. Let's go wait outside." I yawned. Good call. As we waited by the road, I thought about how weird it would be going to school again. In reality, it hasn't been that long, but it feels like school was another life I left behind. The thought of going back and being met by their judgmental eyes flipped my stomach. I can only imagine their reaction, considering the assembly that filled them all in. Undoubtedly, I will be confronted by someone. I'm not sure if I'm ready for that. Tansu and I waited in silence. She was engrossed in the scrolling sky, and my eyes were dropped to my feet. She noticed my slum and tapped her elbow against mine, stealing my attention and returning my wanting gaze with a tender smile. A smile that assured everything would work out today. When the bus pulled up and that nostalgic squeal of the tires hit my eardrums, my mind began branching off in random directions. Overwhelming thoughts of every class and teacher I would endure once again coiled around my throat and drowned me in itchy nerves. I took my seat with a heavy thud and tried my best to breathe. Tansu sat across from me and pressed herself against the wall. It was quiet. I avoided staring out the window and instead traced over the folded leather patterns of the seat in front of me, allowing my vision to blur and those random ideas to fill my head. Alice was concealed behind a mental fog, biding her time. Just don't get too angry, I thought, putting a lot of faith in Alice's incredibly small sense of compassion. My chest pounded along with the bumpy road. In a few minutes, we would arrive, and I would be in for the hardest fight so far, keeping my emotions in check. I can do this. Turning my head to Tansu, I extended my voice. "Tan," she looked my way. "If you see Joey before I do, tell him I'm in today." She smirked. "Will do." The bus then took a slight turn onto the school driveway. The 7 or so kids on the bus began moving around and getting their stuff ready. In a minute, the bus eased to a halt and the doors opened. Everyone lifted themselves with dramatic displays of exhaustion and sauntered down the lane. A scattered horde of deployed kids bottlenecked the main doors. We found a place to fit with all the rest, and it was there that I got my first taste of the day. At least 5 different people took notice of me and couldn't help but stare. I made brief eye contact with 1 or 2 and only established a peripheral glance before directing my eyes to Tansu's back in front of me. Shame, guilt, and misplacement gurgled in my belly. Waiting in the cafeteria before the first bell, Tansu followed me to the distant corner far away from the main collection of students. From what I could see, most didn't notice or didn't care that I was present, but eventually, more and more caught me in their scanning gaze, so I lowered my head and tried to hide behind my hair. The first bell jingled, and everyone dispersed. Stricken by fear and reminiscence, I wandered the halls like all the hundreds of times before. I started to notice all the familiar things. The smell of chemical floor cleaner, hand sanitizer, and grubby fingerprints on every locker. The combined stench of different perfumes and body sprays. All the varied paper textures and a muddled food smell slithering through the halls from the lunchroom. Additionally, my ears were bombarded by whispers and overlapping conversations. It was almost like my skin itself was a lightning rod for every perceivable sense. Every human shape was paired with unique distortions around their form. Tickling pings prodded my taste buds and constantly drew my eyes across many faces. I shook it off as best as I could, but It was so overwhelming. Alice hummed. I felt their pertinent gazing, like everyone else was colorful and bright, but I was a muted gray. It was becoming harder to breathe in the crowd, and I had to slow my pace. Arrogance, Alice whispered, her voice drowning out all surrounding noise. You think you're better than the magic you harbor. I huffed, speaking softly out loud. I'm stronger than your influence. I've been fighting my own inner demons all my life. That may be. But releasing your demons never has such a dire consequence, has it? Her voice gurgled and faded away, leaving a pounding headache that shook my stance. Tansu remained at my side, unaware. I emptied my lungs, which she heard and looked at me. I smiled and she smiled back, but must have noticed the worry on my face. She slowed with me and took my hand in hers at her waist, squeezing it and giving me an encouraging look. She had held my hand briefly, many times into the night. When anxiety crippled me, when terrorizing depression crushed my mind, her little reminder was well appreciated. I squeezed back, and she released. I lifted my head and fought to strengthen my posture. Inside my head, I whispered, Alice, you'll tell me if there's a tuffle close by, right? She sighed. Don't worry. I'll let you know before she gets killed. I don't want him or anyone else to claim that essence. I considered her words as Tansu offered a petite goodbye and she split off, entering her first class. Now, I truly felt lost at sea. I did my best to ghost through the halls and made it to my first class without being stopped. I sat in the back, rigid and on edge. The class soon filled, and the teacher rose to the front of the room for the day's introduction. I was immediately noticed, but no attention was called to my sudden presence. I believed it to be intentional, a courtesy on my behalf. That first class started out uneventful, but notably pleasant in comparison to my expectations. Still, I found it hard to remain focused for long. Whenever I started to lean into the discussion, Alice's presence fizzled in my brain like a carbonated whirlpool. The teacher then rolled down a projector screen for a video about historical artists and the impact they had after their death. As the lights dimmed and the video started, a voice sprouted from my head and startled me. You're doing well so far. Alice spoke condescendingly and loudly, trying hard to keep my attention on her. I didn't respond, just shifted my eyes around, checking the people around me. Paranoia was apparent as her raspy voice churned. Now I see why you were so angry. This place is festering beneath the surface. So many insecure, rabid little disappointments. Can they hear her? I thought to myself, eyes widening with every rushed glance around the room. No one reacted in any way. If only they knew what you were, what you've done. She snickered. We can show them. In my head, I whispered, Shut up. You won't get to me that easily. I visibly scowled. A sneer burned in the dark recesses of my mind. I could see her, though my eyes were open. I felt her energy subside, and the headache I didn't fully realize was there simmered. I sighed, rubbing my eyes and keeping them locked on the projected lesson. The video continued for about 20 minutes at a low volume until it reached the end, and the lights were switched back on. The teacher stood before us and started in on the questions. It didn't take too long before the bell rang, and I slipped out of the room. One class was done, easy enough. The next class approached quickly as I raced down the hall. The gym was my next destination. It was difficult to remember how things worked here after being absent for only 10 or so days. Since the school was so small, the schedule was varied, meaning one day gym could be before lunch, and another it could be my second class like it was today. The school board sucked at planning, but it worked for the most part. I was able to get there quickly, almost excited to spend the entire class running in circles around the basketball court. All of this energy piling up inside needed to be released healthily, and this was a perfect opportunity. Entering the double doors, I saw most of the class was gathered at the bleachers, waiting for the coach. I entered as another student left, and then stopped in the doorway when I saw their eyes on me. They all stared intently, confused and frozen. I looked at them with tight lips and one hand on my shoulder strap. They're staring at me, Alice said, discomfort up front. I whispered, Definitely not. I licked my lips and continued, joining the group but keeping my distance. They released me from their scrutinizing eyes, and we all waited for class to begin. A few minutes after the bell rang, the coach exited his office to start the day. "All right, everyone." He firmly clapped his hands together, addressing us. "We're going to have a free period today. I have to... Oh, Kimberly. I didn't know you'd be joining us today." He stared at me. I grit my teeth and shifted in my shoes. My dry throat itched. "I didn't tell anyone, Coach Miller." It was clear in his face that he was trying to sort out an appropriate response, tilting his head up slightly with lowered brows and a contemplative eye. "Well, it's good to have you back." A heated discomfort filled the air, giving a chill up my spine. Anyways, free period, like I said. Go nuts." He gave a wide, fake smile and walked away from the group. I knew that free period meant that he was backed up on work, considering he doubled as the high school English teacher. We all moved to the other side of the gymnasium and split apart to change in the locker rooms. Most of the girls stayed relatively close to each other, changing in the open, while I, as well as another 2 girls, separated and changed in individual stalls. Exiting the locker room in a loose shirt and shorts, I immediately started my jog around the room and felt instantly liberated. I relished in the light flicks of wind as I picked up speed. The gusts pushed through my hair and scraped by my ears. I was fast. My legs carried the weight of my body with ease, and the way I rounded corners was tight and smooth, balance unmatched. 10 laps, half a mile without slowing down, and in record time. I couldn't help but smile at this accomplishment, but I knew the reasons why. It wasn't entirely my doing. I glanced at the others as they shot hoops, played catch, and a few girls walked along the edges. Another 10 laps made a mile, and I reduced my speed to a fast walk. My heartbeat picked up, and my breathing was irregular. Perfect. All this pent-up energy was being expelled, leaving me feeling more and more like myself. Feeling the gentle heat rise off my skin, I fluffed my shirt and closed my eyes completely. Blinded, I imagined the borderline of the basketball court. I pictured my feet moving along the center of the thin red line, and as I came up to a corner, I slowed and took the turn, balancing on the edge. It was vividly clear, even with my eyes shut. I could feel where I was, where they all were. Opening my eyes, I confirmed my feet to be exactly where I thought. This gave me goosebumps and made me wonder how else I have changed, how much of the change was me and not her. "You should lift the weights," Alice chimed in with a joke. I scoffed lightly, finding her comment a little funny. "Maybe I can finally deadlift more than 30 pounds, I responded with sarcasm. "You could curl 100 with ease, even now." Just then, I felt a tickle across my skin. Following that sensation, I turned my head to the center of the room and swatted my left hand in the air, instinctually. A tennis ball hurtling in my direction was slapped away and sent flying toward the doorway. My feet firmly planted themselves as I stared in disbelief at my own action. The known quiet girl, Louisa, was the one who lost control of the ball and gave me a shocked look as well. Eyes unstable, I saw 2 of the guys playing basketball witness my deflection and watched for a response. "Sorry, Kim," Louisa apologized hastily. She apprehensively stared from behind her round glasses and wispy bangs. I smirked at her. "It's no problem," I said softly, throat dry. When she came over to retrieve the ball, she stopped and stared. The way she curled away, yet planted her feet, showed she had something to say, but her shy demeanor wouldn't allow it. I put my hands on my hip and cocked my head. Then I smiled. "What's up, Louisa?" Her lips pinched and she peered at me through her loose bangs. "Nothing. It's just... welcome back." My smile grew, and at the same time, a toxic shiver coated my skin in goosebumps. Alice gagged, which made my own throat flex. I played it off with a little throat clearing and dropped one hand from my hip, leaning into the other. "Thanks," was all I said. She nodded, growing more shy by the second, and backed up a few steps before turning away. I shook my head, amused, and tapped one foot. I then continued forward with my cool-down lap. 2 more laps went by quickly, eating up the last chunk of this period. The coach came back out to give us a 10-minute warning, which meant it was time to get changed and clean ourselves off. Returning to the bathroom, I crammed into the same stall and changed back into my jeans and shirt. Normally, I would use the towels the school provided to wipe the sweat from my body, but that wasn't necessary today. Within a few minutes, I returned to my backpack and slung it over my shoulder, ready to embrace the hall once again. Right now, I wish I had my CD player to, at the very least, set a barrier. The bell rang, and as I submerged once more into the fray, I almost immediately felt their energies. Stuck in the wave of bodies, their chatter, breathing, rustle of fabrics, and clang of lockers opening and closing pressed against my head like a wall of rusted nails. I winced, blinked, and shook my body to try and break free, but I could feel it. Some part of me, deep inside, reached out and connected with everyone around me. The vague summation of their emotions, little inklings of what they felt, were imminent at a minor level. I was like an antenna, receiving various signals from my peers. The more I listened in and embraced the flow, the dizzier I became. All at once, my body swayed, and I braced myself against a set of lockers. Let go. Ignore it, I thought to myself. But a high-pitched ringing erupted in my head, and with it came the voices. Disembodied murmurs at first, random nonsense that didn't apply to anything at all, but then I could hear people around me plain as day, not just tones. My eyes shot open, bloodshot, and directed to the other end of the hall where I saw two people sharing a conversation. They each looked in my direction, then whispered. Look, I heard. It's her. They must be 50 feet away, but I could hear their whispering. Tension rose in my chest and a cold sweat formed on my brow. Instinct triggered, and I jolted from the locker, moving swiftly down the hall toward my next class. As I slipped past numerous faces, I collected phrases. Is that... Did you hear about her dad? Kim? Is that... Every uttered word was expected and discarded. The school was quickly informed of my attendance, but no one would confront me. That's all I wanted. Oh, good. The worms are wriggling in your ears. You sure you can keep it under lock and key? Tiring yourself out just didn't work, did it? Alice's voice overpowered the others. I reached a turn that was lacking in students and slowed my pace. In this more secluded hallway, I moved by 3 different students all leaning on their lockers. Whispers that were never coming from the people around me, sharpened, then faded. I understood them more. Alice, all those noises and hums, the disembodied whispers, are they coming from the ditch? I asked under my breath. They are. You're connected, after all. But I've been hearing stuff like that for as long as I can remember. It's just more defined now with you. God, I just want some peace and quiet today. Your senses heighten when you're stimulated. It's useful. I shook my head. Not here. I'm not in danger. I groaned, all at once exhausted. Up ahead, I caught movement and looked up to see someone wearing a hoodie turn the corner, coming my way. It was clearly a guy, keeping his head low and just going about his business. But as he drew closer, I found myself gradually moving away from his lane, closer to the wall. The moment our paths crossed, my entire body was shaken. A creeping electric wave slid across my skin from head to toe and back, and I stopped. Turning my head to his back, I watched him continue down the hall without a change in his posture in any way. Alice seemed to hold her breath, before uttering a soft, curious, I felt it. Something familiar, but with a different taste. You think? I started. Peculiar. I don't know what that was, she answered. I would know if my siblings were around. So you can relax. A deep breath filled my lungs, and I chose to set that aside. I had to keep moving, keep myself occupied, so I marched on toward my next class. I made it a few more feet down the hall and tried to immerse myself in the quiet. Suddenly, a voice shouted from behind me. Hey! Expecting no one in particular, I turned around and finished my step before coming to a dead stop. Instantly, my stomach dropped, and my heart jumped up my throat. Joey? His name fell from my lips. He ran toward me. The guy in the hoodie still went along his way in the background. Joey had this glowing face and an excited stumble, like a little kid at a playground. I could hear his bag clapping against his back all the way until he reached me, where he stopped abruptly, and his chest rose with cycling breaths. A flutter in my gut brought excitement to my eyes as I took in his image. He wore the same old hat and leather jacket and black skinny jeans, smiling gleefully and one hand gripping the bag strap over his shoulder. I stared, unable to find a word to say, expression lacking true joy, but emulated such. He swallowed and leaned in a little. "You're finally here. I'm so glad." He smiled big, cheeks turning red. "Hey, Joey," I stammered nervously. Almost immediately, his bright smile started to fade when he noticed my outward appearance. Depressed, baggy eyes, red nose, and slightly dirty hair. My posture was weak, skin pale. I wasn't my best, even I knew that. He slouched. "Kim, you look different." His now frowning face caused mine to sink. Low static built in one ear, and my head instinctually tilted away from it. My lungs seized, weightless. "Yeah, I'm just tired. Still working things out in my head, but I needed to get out of the house." I chuckled anxiously. He gave a misplaced grin, trying to be funny. "Totally. But shouldn't you have maybe slept a wink or taken a shower first?" Alice laughed, causing me to flinch, then I frowned. He noticed my retraction and realized his joke didn't land. "I'm only kidding. You look fine, really." He smiled again. I didn't say anything, now stuck in a perpetual middle ground. On one hand, I was ecstatic to see him and wanted nothing more than to spend the rest of the day catching up. On the other, that wall I built years ago was still holding. And now, there was another layer. He noticed my silence. "You good, bud?" I shrugged. "I suppose. How about you? How's shop class? Did you finish the little car?" He shook his head, amused. "Nope. Don't ask me how, but I managed to break it in half," he admitted, holding back a bemused grin. I raised an eyebrow. "How did you— don't ask. Not my finest moment." I snickered to myself. He added, "It's seriously good to see you. Are you back for good? Can I stop bugging Tansu about you now?" he said lighthearted. I shrugged. "Today is a trial run. See how things shake out. And Tansu didn't mind. She was relaying everything to me." I hated bothering her, but my phone calls can only get ignored so many times. I sank a little deeper. "Right. I'm sorry for never talking on the phone." "Hey, I get it, but I still wanted to try, just in case." A pause as the bell rang out, calling an end to hall time. Neither of us reacted. This is where we would stay. His eyes dropped to his feet. "Kim." Sorrow and anger fought for dominance over his words. As he spoke, I sighed and my eyelids grew heavy. "I'm so sorry no one answered the phone when the police called. It was late and I was awake, but I assumed it was nothing." A lump formed in my throat. "It's okay. I would have felt bad taking up your couch anyway." I tried to keep the tone consistent, not allowing it to be too sad. "I wanted to be there for you." His voice cracked as emotions I know he's been holding back started to emerge. "I can't imagine what you were going through. I'm just so thankful that she was able to take you in and watch over you." Both his hands jammed into his pockets, insecure. A tremble in my lips introduced the feeling of tears as potent regret filled my chest. "Joey, I'm sorry. I wanted to reach out, but I've been such a mess, and I didn't want to do that to you again." He sniffled. "Of course you were." He raised his head, and I got a glimpse of his red eyes. He looked to the ceiling, almost like he was trying to use gravity to fight his tears. He huffed exasperatingly. "Fuck. I just wish I knew what happened. I've been listening to a bunch of moronic rumors. After the assembly, they spread like wildfire, and I couldn't do shit to set things right." Joey let his bag slide from his shoulder and rest on the floor and crossed his arms firmly. I felt weaker, the hum in my brain now twofold with overlapping pitches. My voice came out raspy as nausea settled. I can only imagine the crap people have said. Why didn't you just call me once? I know you were fucked up, but 10 minutes? Just to fill me in? You couldn't afford that? He asked dejectedly. My tongue tasted like cardboard and blood. I bit the inside of my cheek, frustration rising as I beat the hell out of myself within. I knew this would happen. Look, I began, choking on my own words. I wanted to. I really did. But I was fighting my brain every second of every day. The only time I felt good enough to call was the exact reason why I shouldn't, because it would restart the cycle. Any clear moment I had was few and far between, and I was in a desperate need of clarity. I still am. Does that make sense? He sighed. A dry tension surrounded us. Yes, it does. And I'm not mad. I'm just... He bounced his arms, tugging with the knotted fists in his pockets. I'm so pent up with all of this. I don't want to ruin your day, but can you please help me understand? I don't want to be left behind. Not with this. Not again. Anxious depression gripped his throat. I rubbed my neck, then scratched the icy flesh. I won't do that to you. I didn't plan on keeping it from you. You deserve to know. My dad was murdered when I was at Tansu's house. Flashes of that night, along with snippets of audio, played in my skull like an old film reel. My eyes shut halfway, becoming blurry and dark. I squeezed my eyes hard and tapped my foot. He obviously noticed and kept quiet until I came to. My mouth was dry and my ears filled with cotton. I continued the lie. I found him in his room. My hand gripped my neck gently, imagining the gash in his neck. Joey looked at me. More students made their way down the hall, my aura lashing to touch theirs as they passed by, each one pulling at me slightly in an invisible way. I secured myself tight against a locker. He grumbled. He owned a gun still, right? I remember him showing it to me when I was like 11. I nodded, compiling some story. From what the cops said, he got a shot off, but was disarmed. I felt a cold tickle in my chest, reliving the gunshot in an instant. They stabbed him and cut his throat. My voice became airy at the end. Alice snickered, enjoying the irony. His eyes shifted between mine, though I was not connected with his gaze. I could feel his trembling begin, that soul-shredding chaos erupting in his body. Confusion. Jesus, I don't know what to say. There's not much to say. That's kind of what made this so difficult, is I don't really know how to feel about it. His head tilted, almost disappointed. Come on, you don't mean that. I know your dad was a dickbag sometimes, but... But what? I interrupted. He didn't deserve it? He's still my dad? The words dripped from my mouth as a light-headed wave washed over me. Miss Curlin's words echoed the same pitiful tone. A pressure formed against my temples. Irritating hot air brushed my skin and started to make me uncomfortable. Well, yeah, Joey stammered. I scoffed, averting my eyes to the other side of the hall, snapping on to students lingering close by. That's a bunch of shit, I said through grit teeth. Hey. He reached out and lightly gripped my shoulder. I snapped onto him, brows angled and eyes bloodshot. Tears burned the edge, and my lower lip stiffed as I searched his face, picking apart his concern. My throat warbled, and my slum started to return. A little voice deep inside reminded me to control myself. Joey, I don't want to be an asshole, but you really didn't know my dad. What you saw growing up, how he changed after my mom died, that's only scratching the surface. He bit his lip, frustrated. What does that mean? A growl rumbled down my throat, something that wasn't me coming from deep inside. You really want the truth? Now? Of course. He didn't hesitate. Fine. I locked eyes with him, a fire in my stare. He was a drunk. abusive, controlling piece of shit. My words hit him like cinder blocks. Slow to respond, his grip tightened a little. Did he hurt you? Anger crept across his tongue. Suddenly, I didn't feel like myself. My voice became deeper, more playfully sinister and coarse. He hit me, yelled at me, pushed me, and treated me like garbage. Behind every word was a tickle of Alice's voice, her echo. I didn't know if it projected outward, but I could feel it wrapped around my voice, and I couldn't stop it. Horror warped his face, which then evolved to anger. His fist dropped to his side, knuckles white and trembling. I knew it! I fucking knew it! His teeth clashed together, holding back years of suspicion and building angst. That's the truth. He jostled his feet, but remained before me. Kim, he started. Don't. There's nothing you could have done, I assured a little more harshly than I meant to. He stood awkwardly for a moment, looking to me, then down the hall, and to his feet. I don't know how I feel, he admitted. Welcome to my world. I tapped my foot, slowly releasing the stress. He rolled his shoulder. Fuck. I'm just happy you weren't home at the time. If something were to happen to you... When he said that, I was overcome by a hostile sadness. The idea that he still holds me as such a centerpiece in his life frustrated and confused me in so many ways. Even now, after I kept him at a shrouded distance. The reignited anger started to slip away. The screaming I didn't know was in the air faded to a dull ring. Slowly, I began to sulk. My crossed arms slid down to my stomach, and my chin lowered as sadness took its turn. You'd probably be happier not having to worry about me. His face went straight. Don't say stupid shit like that. Don't you even dare. I bit my lip, nose becoming wet. But it's true. You shouldn't waste your energy worrying about me, and just focus on your family, on your sister. Kim, I worry because I care. He straightened out completely and stepped closer. I pressed my back tightly against the locker, backing away as much as I could. My hands began to shake. Why? My voice cracked, and I held myself tighter, looking to the floor. Why are you still here, Joey? Why am I? Because you're my best friend. And now held a look of fear on his face. Your best friend? What kind of friend would... I stopped and let out a huge, hot breath of angst. I shut you out for a reason. Don't you see? I wanted to live in that crap alone. Because I hate the way it made me treat you. I hate the person I became and all the times I yelled at you for trying. All the lies I told to make you hate me. Just so you didn't have to put up with my mood swings and anger issues. I was trying to protect you, but you just wouldn't back down. I yelped, trying to keep my volume under control, but my voice ricocheted down the hall. As he spoke, I heard the profound sorrow in his voice. No, I wouldn't back down, because you deserve to be happy. You should never have to face so much grief and anger alone. Not as long as I'm alive. I don't care how much you avoid me or push me away. I know you only do it because you're scared, and that's okay. But I will always be here for you, because I care too damn much. I bit my tongue, holding back so many unfiltered thoughts. After everything that's happened, all I feel is guilt when I look at you. It's not your fault. It never was. I just can't. Tears built, but never fell. The pressure formed made my head swell, and my teeth throb. He threw his arms up a little. If anything, now's the time to let me in. Let me help. Because I won't just sit back and watch you wither away. Not like with Natalia. He shed the first tear. I can't do anything to make her better. I can only watch as she slowly dies from an incurable disease. But you, I can help. I can tell you it's gonna be okay and have it mean something. I thought of Alice, and I thought of Destro. If things were as they seemed to him, if my dad was simply murdered and I was left an orphan, then this would be different. I probably would finally give in, and let Joey and Tantu help me recover. But that isn't how things are, and I think that's what's eating me up more than anything. I can't let him in, because now there is a very real risk of harm. Right now, I can feel her prying, luring me into the abyss. She thinks if she remains hushed, I will trip, but I'm keen to her method. Today proves that my messy relationship with Joey stirs up too many complicated emotions that weaken my grip. I don't want to hurt him, now more than ever. He can't be involved. My voice got quiet, so quiet he had to lean his head in slightly. I've known you for so long, Joey. Your mom always treated me like a daughter. Your whole family are some of the nicest people I've ever met, but you don't understand. I contemplated hard, the truth caged behind my teeth. You'd be in danger. He sank. Danger? What are you talking about? I trembled as the tears stacked. No, I whispered. My mind started to break away from my current reality. My soul felt tugged, drifting away from where I stood and being left high above the school. I felt the air shift and the world turn. Blissful winds swept my conscience away and brought me to a place where I felt safe. A box. My ears were muted. His voice could not reach me here. I could forget. Let go of what ails me and just float. He reached out and grabbed my left bicep again, gently. This action snapped me back into reality. I twitched, then relaxed. My face was dampening from the hushed crying. I felt his eyes on me, waiting for a response. An elaboration. I sniffled and started breathing heavily. He released my arm, and he spoke with the heaviest, most miserable tone I've ever heard from him. I do understand. Hesitant, I glared emptily as he disconnected. Without another word or final glance, he grabbed his bag and started to walk away. He's leaving. My thoughts began to spiral out of control. 1,000 invisible punches smashed into my chest and gut, wobbling my knees and forcing me to the floor. I moved my left hand to my throat and held it, trying to steal a wisp from my lungs, but only light gasps escaped and a small squeak of fear. I cried. This is the best option. It kills me, but at least he will be safe. I won't be able to hurt him should I fail to control this demon, and they can never use him against me. That's what I told myself, over and over as his footsteps got quieter. It was at that moment that I truly understood how he must have felt that day and every day since then. He came to visit me after my mom died. He waited to see me and be a shoulder for me to cry on. I heard him at the front door, tried to force his way past my dad, but only got knocked to the ground. I remember my dad yelling at him, cursing and threatening him. Joey never gave up, though. He ran into the woods and snuck around back, grabbing a handful of dirt and throwing it at my window. A shard of glass from a broken bottle was in the dirt, and he ended up slicing his hand. I saw him waving to me from the ground below, his hand dripping blood, and a smile on his face. I will never forgive myself for being so heartless, and I will never forget the defeat on his face when I stared him down and closed the blinds. In my head, that was it. He was gone from my life. However, when I saw him next, he greeted me happily. He didn't bring my mother up. He just tried to make me smile. Even after I finally broke down and lashed out, using him as a punching bag, he continued to be my friend no matter how many days I avoided contact or got angry at life. He was always there when I needed him, and especially when I didn't. He is the greatest person, the greatest friend, and I can't do this. I whipped around. My feet carried me as fast as they could until I threw my arms around him. On my toes, I buried my face into the back of his neck and cried out loud. Please don't leave me. Please don't go. I burrowed my face deep into his leather jacket, taking in the old familiar smell. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for letting you down. For hurting you. I... It was quiet. He didn't respond at first. He didn't even take a breath. We just stood there in the mostly empty hall, classes in session and adrift in our own intimate world. To my surprise, I felt both of his hands gently touch my arms. Then he spun around and took hold of my shoulders, eternally gazing into my eyes. A frail smile crept onto his face, and he closed the gap between us. My eyes were wide open, looking over his shoulder with my nose stuffed into the jacket. "I'm not going anywhere," he tenderly spoke into my ear. I let my eyes ease shut, and my body relaxed a little. The ringing was gone, the humming voices hushed, and nothing but his touch could be felt. I've hugged him before, rarely, but it does happen on occasion. This is the hug I always dream of when finding a happy place. A hug from someone you love, from family, from your closest friend. A hug that says more than any words ever could. Acceptance. To speak, I pulled my head back just enough to uncover my mouth. "There's so much I want to tell you. It just isn't safe," I whispered timidly. "Not safe?" he questioned. "Just listen to me. A lot is going on. Things you'd never believe even if I told you. I can tell you one thing. Just one. Someday soon, I will sort all of this chaos out, and things will go back to normal, like they used to be," he whispered somberly. "Better." I let out a gleeful smile and laugh. "So much better. You just have to bear with me, okay?" I sniffled. "I've been patient this long. I can wait." He leaned back and held my shoulders again. That sincere, love-filled smile of his just kept me entranced. "Joey, thank you for never giving up on me." He smirked. "I wouldn't dream of it, kiddo." Then he did something I never saw coming. He leaned in very slow and quietly kissed my forehead. Just a light touch, just enough to express what he could not easily say. That wasn't all. He proceeded to remove his jacket. The faded black leather with the dark red lining was now draped over me. "I'll see you later, Kim." My arms fell limp to the side. I watched him as he stuffed his hands into his pockets and walked back down the hall, his bag swaying by his side. When he was out of sight, my fingers moved on their own to my forehead and touched the space where his lips were placed. Then I dug my tired grip into the jacket and lifted the leather to my nose, inhaling deeply. Bliss. Maybe today wouldn't be so bad after all.